Welcome to Black Man Lab's Lab Results. We are live on Wednesday, April 13th. Years flying by fast. I am Marty Monaghan, Executive Director of the Black Man Lab. Tonight we're going to have a great conversation with one of our guests from this past Monday's Black Man Lab and our conversation around reparations. The gentleman that we have tonight with us is a stalwart in the work of reparations and has been doing it for many years. So before we get into that and before we get to introduce him, I want to just give you a little background about the Black Man Lab. Black Man Lab started roughly 5 years ago by four fathers that got together to just provide their sons with some different voices. We know quite often as fathers of sons that our sons will tune us out. They'll start to listen to one of our friends, an uncle, a godfather, you name it. They'll listen to another man, but sometimes they don't listen to us as fathers. That's just how it goes. So that started, like I said, roughly 4 years ago with four fathers. And what happened was those young men started bringing in their friends because the information that was being given to them was so important. Um, Before the pandemic, we grew to over 250 black men every week meeting at the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA, talking about different subjects each week, either something around self-development or something around professional development. And within that, we always make sure that we have some culturally aware conversation weaved in there as well, because we know that our young folks have to be um, very culturally conscious and have a good idea of from whence they came, given to them from somebody that came from the same place, if you understand what I mean by that. So that's the Black Man Lab. We are meeting again every week at the Andrew and Walter Young YMCA, and we are back getting our numbers back up to crazy numbers again. We're at roughly about 150, anywhere between 150 to 170 men each week now. And I expect that that's going to continue to grow. Before we get started with any meeting that we have, what we always do is we make sure that we call on the names of our ancestors. Here at Black Man Lab Lab Results tonight, because we have such a short period of time, what we do is we just call one ancestor that would be very proud of us meeting in this space, in this virtual space. And if they were around today, they would probably be in this space with us. So, with that, I'm going to ask my guest to come on before I actually introduce him. I want him to come on and call on an ancestor. I think that tonight, given our conversation, Brother Jumoke, I think that let's think of somebody that was really important in this work. And I would like you to just bring that name forward, and then we're going to call that name together, and then we'll get started into our conversation. Who would you think tonight would be a great name?
Well, I would like to call Baba Imari Obadeli. I say.
The Baba Omari Obadeli, Ashe. All right, so we're going to bring him into this space with us tonight. And then all the other ancestors, of course, that have done this great work around reparations. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and get started with our conversation. And I want to have my brother, who I've come to know since I've been here in Atlanta, as just a stalwart, as I said, in this work of reparations and just doing a variety of other things. He's now a native of the Miami area. We miss him here in Atlanta, but he's doing his thing down there. Brother Jumoke, come on and introduce yourself.
Greetings, Black Man Lab. Brother Jumoke Ifetayo. I currently serve as Southeast Regional Rep for Cobra, also the Mayor Co-Chair of the South Florida chapter, and I also am the facilitator of a committee that I created called the Ashe Committee. And I've also had other leaderships within Cobra. I was the national secretary as well as the national co-mayor co-chair as well.
That's awesome. And Brother Jamoke, could you just give our audience, for those that don't know, let them know what Cobra is?
Sure. So Cobra is the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America.
Ashe. Okay. So we're gonna get into that conversation a little further as in terms of your work there. But before we do that, what I always like to make sure that we do here at Lab Results is talk about from whence you came, because that's what's important for this for our folks that are listening in to know that um, there may be some commonality in where you these folks that we have on here come from, so that they can really understand your history. So you were born where, brother Jumoke?
I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and I lived some in New York and some in Virginia. Um, However, we moved to Atlanta in 1975 when I was 11 years old, and actually moved into the neighborhood where that YMCA is.
Oh
I
wow.
lived in Shamrock Gardens, which is about a quarter of a mile or less from the YMCA. I used to go to the YMCA for summer camp programs, as well as I learned how to swim in that pool at the YMCA. So
Wow.
that the very location of Black Men Lab is very endearing to me. Now, I consider myself a dynamic merger of my mother and my father. My father is a civil rights activist, kind of retired now, but did a lot of work in his adult life around community organizing, voter registration, economic empowerment, and I could probably talk all day just about all of the people that he's worked with over the years, from Jesse Jackson to Mayor Dinkins, and on and on and on. But anyway, so the social justice um, influence coming from my father, and then the cultural nationalist influence coming from my mother. My mother was into introduced us to Kwanzaa, introduced us to African culture tradition, Ifa tradition, introduced me to vegetarianism and healthy lifestyle living, all of those kind of things. So I like to think of myself as someone who merges those two things together. How do we change the society that we're in to better the condition for Black people using culture, African culture, and tradition as a part of that? So I've worked with various organizations. I got my college degree, BA degree is economics and third world studies, double major. People used to ask me when I was in high school what I wanted to do. I said, I want to stay in the world. Right? So that was my thing, trying to figure out how to do that. But so yeah, and after college, I started working. My elders were like, "Well, you got to have some kind of specialty. You can't just go out." So I started working with different nonprofit organizations, and continue to do that now as I do the work that I do with Cobra. Also, I am a father myself. I have a son, 28. His name is Babatunde. He lives in New York. He's an engineer. And my daughter lives in New York as well. She's 30. And proud of her. She's an artist, I guess I would say. Still figuring out her path.
Sure,
Her
sure.
name is
Now,
Lena.
let,
Lena.
let me ask you this, brother Jumoke. You went to high school where?
I was in high school in Atlanta. I
Okay,
said I
which
moved
school?
to Atlanta when I was 11. I went to Venetian Hills Elementary School, which is also in that neighborhood near the Y. But then they started us. They gave some of us the option to go to George High School, which was way in southeast Atlanta, in near close to Forest Park on Jonesboro Road. The school I
Okay,
would have been in the area that I lived, it would have been Thurl High School. Would have been the
okay,
high school. Some of my friends that lived with me in Chevron, they ended up going to Thurl, and some of us chose to go to George High School, which
got
is
you.
now called South Atlanta. For those people haven't been in Atlanta that long. Like, George High School, that don't
Yeah,
even exist no more. So the name changed to South Atlanta.
yeah. When you were saying it, I was like, I'm not familiar with that one, but that makes sense now. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so you went to school, you went to college, and
Went to
after
college in Tennessee, University of the South.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
and when you finished there, what was your first thing that you did getting out of school?
First like job or first
Yeah.
thing? Yeah, yeah. So coming out of college, the first job I got was with a community organization called Acorn, Association for Community Organizations for Reform Now, and they do door-to-door organizing as well as canvassing the community for different issues that they focus on. So that
Gotcha.
was my first job coming out of college, working with Acorn.
Gotcha.
Yes,
And what moved you into the? At what point were you starting to move into the reparations work?
sure. In 1996, the National Convention of Cobra came to Atlanta. I saw a flyer for it, and I said, let me check this out again. Like I was already in the movement, activist space. That's
Mm.
been my whole life. And so I went to the first. I volunteered for the convention when it was in Atlanta, and I was just so impressed with the leadership of Cobra at that time, and also to me, reparations was the one thing that could address people wherever they are.
Mm.
And we talked about this, yes, during the Black Man Lab, that those people who consider themselves Pan Africanists, there's a role for reparations. Those people consider themselves Black nationalists, fits within reparations. Those people want to stay inside the United States and work things through the United States, deals with reparations. So it's the only thing that I know that's really comprehensively can address all the issues in the Black community, whether it's police brutality, education, you know, uh, health disparities, whatever. I think it's the one umbrella that gives us a tool to address all of those issues. And so that's why I was drawn into the reparations movement and for that meeting that they had in Atlanta, 1996.
That meeting kind of was your spark to get into the movement and get involved.
To get into the reparations movement, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Got you. Um, what do you think from that period of time to today? What do you see as um, differences or changes from back then to now? So you talk 1996 to 2022.
Yeah. Well, Cobra always had as a goal making reparations a household word. When I joined in Cobra in 1996, very few people or organizations were talking about reparations. Matter of fact, not even talking about reparations, didn't even know the word. I remember telling people most of the time when I tell people reparations, and I could see the look in their face. So then I would say 40 acres and a mule. Most Black people have some kind of, cognizance around 40 acres and a mule. So even just the word reparations itself wasn't even popular or well known. And we would have to, say 40 acres and a mule, and then sometimes even still explain that, right? So that's where we were. That was where we were in 1996.
Mm. And
But since then, obviously the concept of reparations is tremendous right now in cities and states, and people are talking about in college campuses, on a radio show, on TV, Black Men Lab. It was in the little vignette during the NAACP Image Awards. I mean, it's been in movies. The word reparations is mentioned. Uh, so it's definitely has taken on a whole nother. It definitely has gotten way popular from when it was then in 1996. And there's a lot more movement. In for example, HR 40, which we've been lobbying for. Every year we would get maybe 20, 30 of the Congressional Black Caucus members to sign on as co-sponsors. Never more than I say 40 people ever signed on during those years. But now we're up to 218 Congress people that will have a version of it in the Senate. So the level of recognition and support for reparations is totally evolved since 1996.
let me ask you this: back in 1996, did you find other um, black organizations were? Did you ever come into any opposition with them as you talked about reparations?
I don't know so much if I would say opposition. I do think, though, I'm thinking back, one of the struggles then and even still now, we've never really have gotten the Black church to really embrace reparations. And
Mm.
I think that's really critical because we know when we study our movement and we study our history, the Black church has always been an anchor and always been a strong force in any movement. Um, and so that has been a challenge and even still a challenge today. And in terms of organizations, I don't know if I would say as strong as opposition. However, I would say like, then and even still now, you still have, people who feel like reparations is like, pie in the sky, why are we, focusing on that when we got quote unquote real problems to address, whether, it's voting, voter suppression or these things that people feel are, more tangible or more urgent or more, it needs to be addressed right now, you know, there would be opposition from, so I don't like I said, still would say opposition so strong, but, people would may redirect the conversation to those type of things and thinking that, reparations is good, but that's sort of like, idealism or not really something that's tangible in the near future. So we don't want to really put a lot of focus on that or energy on that. We want to talk about police murder or whatever, other kinds of concerns.
What do you think is the kind of pathway to getting folks? Like I look at what we did, Monday at Black Man Lab, and one of the things that I always do when we're in the lab is I sit up front there. I'm just really observing our audience to see if they're engaged, and then on top of that, if they're getting whatever the panelists are offering. And I know 100% because I got a whole bunch of calls since then from folks that were there and talking about how great it was. But I know that everybody was very engaged in that space, right? Um, what do you think or what are methods that you think would be a great way for us to get the message of what reparations is really about out to the masses, to because in theory, right, it makes complete sense. Everybody else has got,
Right.
every other organization that had any sort of oppression was got some reparations, right? um, what's the means for us to do that, do you think?
I would say a couple things. Well, first of all, I would say every group. There's been a few groups that have gotten
Well, yeah,
reparations.
yeah, yeah.
But your point is well taken. That I have groups that have moved, successfully in that space, or with the conversation of reparations. So one of the things I think is that we know that uh, one way for things to become more popular with the mass is for unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, it is what it is when celebrities and people with, high profile, you know, uh, begin to embrace it and talk about it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
to me, I see like, what if somebody like a Tyler Perry was to push reparations? What if somebody like a John Legend was to push reparations? What about someone like a Rihanna was to push reparations? It would change, my opinion, it would change how the masses would relate to it, right? More people would be embracing of it. So I think that's one thing, that, I see that happening, more and more. Like I said, we're seeing reparations. So many people, they just kind of, may drop it in a song, right? So, I mean, so many rap songs talk about mention 40 acres and a mule. Kendrick Lamar, as he mentioned, reparations, and even Beyonce mentions reparations in one of her recent songs. And so, I was thinking about the TV show. Oh man, what's the TV show with Diana Ross' daughter on it?
Oh, yeah, Blackish.
Blackish, right? They did a whole thing around Juneteenth and reparations, right? So the more and more I think that happens, the more and more I think that the masses will relate to it. The other thing, though, is, and this is always, an issue in the movement, is just, and sometimes I even be uncomfortable just talking about it, but we need money. Like, if we had more financial resources, then we could run, very, impactful, say, marketing, campaign around reparations. So you would see
Mm-hmm.
it on billboards. You'll see it, say, social media memes that may catch on and go viral. And, we could have a team of people that just, focus on how to craft a good message about reparations and to get it out through social media and to, push it out there. And so those are the main two things. And like I said, also, I think that, like I said, we have had organizations, mainstream organizations, to support it. I'm not really sure how much they really push it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say like the NAACP now is on board. More recently has got more on board with reparations. But I don't know how much they really push it. With their membership and their leadership. It seemed like to me they would call us in and say, hey, we'd like you to do a training with our chapter leaders around reparations, or what are some specific ways that NAACP can engage more in reparations. Like, we haven't really had those conversations with them. Like, they sit at the table or some strategy meetings and things like that with us. And, but I think that, to me, some of those organizations could also do more than, verbally endorse it, or, come to some meetings, but really figure out how to get their membership and their leadership behind it in a more profound way. We know all these people, like, we've talked to these folks, Al Sharpton, and, Hillary Shelton is the main person that does a lot of lobbying and for NAACP at the national level. And, we've had, some, conversations, some communications with these people, but then, like I said, for them to really more fully embrace it, and really push it out to their, leadership to get more involved,
Do you think that the conversation of reparations and trying to push it forward lends itself to excuse me lends itself to kind of a slippery slope as it relates to if black folks got the reparations that they are due? And I'm not just talking about, we've seen some pockets of people getting some sort of reparations, some, areas getting some reparations, but on a federal level, do you think that those people on a federal level are, and I'm trying to craft these words properly, do you think that they are not incented to do that because it changes the paradigm of where black folks are in society potentially?
Yeah, I mean, the fullness of really what's needed in terms of reparations, ultimately would mean some power dynamics, right? Some power shifts in America. That's where you're going. And I agree, and we know we have our good brother Frederick Douglass that talks about, power doesn't concede anything without a demand, and never will, and never has, and so that we have to really, look at that and look at how, the, ultimately that it is talking, we're talking a power shift in America. We're talking about really systemic change in America. And of course, we know there's going to be pushback to that, and even if whatever we get, I always say this, I've been saying this more and more lately, even whatever we get, I used to think that in my ideal world, we get put this great package forward, and they would say no, and then we would fight for it, and then they'll say yes. But it's probably going to be much more not as clean as that. It's going to be a little here, a little there, and and whatever we get, I always say, whatever we get in the first round, we're going to have to fight to maintain it and to protect it and push to expand on it. So it's not going to be like this one thing and it's done, and we got reparations, and now let's move on to the next thing. I think it's not going to be as smooth and easy as that. I think it's going to be an ongoing fight. We've seen, if we look at history, we've seen Reconstruction, and we see the pushback for Reconstruction, right? We saw the Civil Rights Movement, so we know it's Obama, Trump, right? So we see, whenever there's gains, there's pushback. So
Sure.
we have to already be prepared for that. We have to already be prepared for that.
Yeah. That's my. I'm in full agreement with that. That's what I was thinking about. We know that the full package, the odds of the full package happening all at once are slim to none, just given history, right? Um,
Right,
but if we have a systemic way to continue to push it
right,
forward,
right.
um,
That's
is
good.
once we get that first piece, now you can start the ball rolling. So, um,
And, and
good.
just adding to that on another level. At one point I was really optimistic and thinking about how we could, through education, basically socialize America, particularly white people, right, or European Americans, to supporting reparations.
Hmm.
And before we could even get to that, they already threw up the critical race theory and all of this stuff. Like they already, okay, y'all are not, we ain't letting you talk about nothing controversial. We're not letting you talk about slavery. We're not going to let you talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, dang, like, because one of the things I was looking at in terms of what one real, so I was looking at how people have how there's a generation now of younger people who have come to say embrace the LGBTQ community, right? And so, you know, if you ask somebody, say, that's 70 years old now about that lifestyle, you know, maybe more of them than not may not be so supportive. But if you ask somebody, say, under 30, most of them would be supportive or embracing of it, right? Or at least not, you know, antagonistic to it, right? And so that to me has happened as a result of socialization, right? That, you know,
Sure.
there's a constant education around, you know, more acceptance of that lifestyle, and you know, and then on top of that, you've had the in school, but also in pop culture and popular culture. So you see more depictions of that in movies and television shows and things like that. You know, and so what I say is that, you know, we've socialized Americans, or at least a younger generation of Americans, to accept it. And likewise, that could happen. I think it happens in reparations. But it looks like they already figured that one out. And I heard it and say, oh, wait a minute, hold up. We don't want that to happen.
Trying to cut it off at the
Cut
pass.
it off at the pass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? I don't think it's work that we'll ever stop on, right?
Yeah.
Until we get it. You know, as we say, free the land. Um, let's talk a little bit about Monday. First of all, what were your thoughts on you? You've been in the lab in the past, probably 2 years ago when you last were there. What do you think of the lab? What did you think of the space?
Man, like I said, I'm glad you asked me that, because I was hoping we were going to just talk about reparations, just talk about the lab itself. It was just, honestly, I mean, I've been in a lot of spaces around Black men. You know, I used to run a Brotherhood Circle. I've worked with many youth programs. I've worked with many rites of passage programs years ago. Man, I was just so, I can't even find the right words, just so impressed and amazed with it, you know. There's so many stories. I mean, even just, you know, I remember, again, like you said, a couple of years ago when I was more active, and I came 4 or 5 times, and brought my godson with me a couple times. And, and, and I remember, like, the large number of people, and I think I shared this with you, you know, when I got there around 6:15, there was so few people in the room. I was like, oh, in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe the Black Lab done fallen off. You know, it looks like it's only going to be about 25 people here. It ain't what it used to be. It's a shell of what it used to be. I remember when it was a couple hundred people. But then over time, you know, more people came, and I don't know what the count was, but I'm sure it was over 100 people. And so I said, okay, so that was, you know, a pleasant surprise that, you know, because so many times something like this usually often doesn't maintain itself for years and years and years. You know, so just the fact that, you know, 2 years deep, you all still have the level of participation, to me is amazing. You know, Dr. Matula Shakur's son coming there was very, you know, poignant to me, because it also connects to reparations, you know, like and Molly spoke about that, you know, getting our brothers and sisters released from jail, you know, is a reparations domain. Particularly our political prisoners and prisoners of war. So for him to be there, and he looks just like his father. I mean, he's just like his father. And I just that was very touching and moving to me. You know, the space of letting, you know, men come in there and offering work opportunities for people, and a young man that, you know, said that he got a job as a result of coming to the Black Man Lab. I don't know of any place like that, you know, where, you know, I was thinking, if I was growing up, you know, if there was a place, I don't remember, you know, a space where Black men, you know, had the opportunity just to say, you know, hey, I'm looking for a job, or I have some jobs, and young men are interested. And then, of course, raising money for the young man that was going to college. Excuse me, raising for the young man that got a program to go, was accepted in a program to go to Africa. And again,
Right.
he was still processing that myself. Like when I was in college, I did a semester abroad in Jamaica, but I don't know if anybody had gone to and say, hey, to help me, make that trip, to Jamaica. I did a semester abroad program in Jamaica when I was in college. So all of that was just so powerful, and just the fact, you call people, oh, the tap dance. I'm big into dance and culture, right? And so to
Yeah.
have a brother do tap dance at the very beginning, right? I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, this is just so amazing. Just to expose him. I was hoping I yelled out to him. He didn't hear me. I said, tell him the history of tap, so that to maybe put more context to it. But he didn't hear
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But I mentioned it to him afterwards. But I think that would have been, even taking it up another notch, to
Yeah.
understand, the importance of, the history of tap dance, right? So all of that was just so profound. I'm glad you all do the libation, even the closing ceremony. I'm linking the chain, and it won't break here. That comes from Cobra. I
Yeah.
only learned that
Yeah.
from Cobra
Yeah.
from Sister Mama and Jerry Algani
Yeah.
created that ritual. And the fact that that's incorporated is just on all levels. It was just awesome to me. I mean, just so profound in so many levels. And it's a very unique thing that Atlanta has. And it's a very unique thing, I think, for Black men to have that opportunity and sacred space that you all created. I'm just hats off to you, brother. Hats off to you.
Well, man, appreciate that and appreciate that feedback. That's exactly what we want it to be. That you just said it. Sacred space, safe and sacred space for Black men, and it's all. It's almost like when you come through the threshold of the door, there's an instant kind of a feel to it. You know what I mean? An energy that's hard to explain. But that's exactly what we want. We want people to be in there to have that feeling of safeness. As Black men, we're 9 times out of 10 we're on guard. It's just natural, right? We're always. But to have a space where you can drop your guard, where you can ask for help, where you can say I want to give help, with
Right.
no strings attached to it, makes
Right.
the space that much more. Again, like we ain't asking you. Everybody has. We know we have bad days. So when we say, "Hey, we want to provide you with some Black Man Lab love," it's genuine. Because at some
Yeah.
point it'll be you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
it's nothing like it. Nothing like it. So I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the feedback. The session on Monday, you guys were on absolute fire.
Good thing. Good thing.
And I know you particularly because I know you. I was looking at you again. I'm observant, so I'm looking at you. I was like, oh, his wheels are spinning so fast right now. There's so much he wants to say, but he's trying to condense it so that we could, do it in there. What you all did offer though, like I said, was impactful because since then I've had at least 8 brothers reach out to me to say
Wow.
how one either they didn't know the depth of reparations or just that they loved the conversation and
Wow. Good.
wanted to have it again. So
Good.
obviously when that happens we will do it again. But again, thanks for the feedback, and we're gonna get back to our numbers of 250 and more. We were fortunate that we over the pandemic we did it virtually, and it helped us to hold. It helped us to hold those folks that were diligent about being a part of the Black Man Lab. But then also it helped us expand because other people could look just like they'll look at this, could
Yeah.
men and women, and then getting their young folks involved, which is ultimately what we want to get. We want our young folks to want to get into whatever we're talking about. In this case, reparations. So, what did you think about? We didn't have a good amount of time to do Q&A
Yeah.
on Monday, which is what I really loved, because I love to hear people's thought processes around the subject matter. So, what do you think was that you heard on the panel? Was there? I know nothing there was new to you, but did you feel that there were certain things that were impactful for the audience?
Well, I think one thing that stands out in my mind is the both myself as well as Brother Reginald and Brother Mike, really emphasizing reparations from the perspective of self-determination. Those who want to go back to Africa, those who feel like we should have our own self-government, govern ourselves and control ourselves. I think that that's a very, that's a part of the conversation that's not often talked about unless you're getting it from the Black nationalist perspective or from somebody. So the fact that we were all three of us were saying the same thing on that particular subject, if you remember, I even asked the question, like, how many people think you might want to move back to Africa? And like 2/3 of the brothers raised their hand, even the young people. I was so surprised,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's an important part of the conversation because, the conversation has, in other, in general, in the public, is, primarily reduced to money, right? And so, for to plant those seeds with them to think about, reparations means like us really separating and governing ourselves as a possibility, or us going back to Africa and governing ourselves over there. I think to me that was one of the most impactful things, that message and seed that we planted with the young people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And we talked about this a little bit before. To watch the kind of the maturation of the young folks that have been coming there for a bit, that
Yeah.
started as just maybe a young teenager that really may not have had a whole lot of interest to being in the room, but to watch them mature into like, oh, this is a cool space. But then not only that, to start grasping whatever the subject matter is, and even to the point of taking notes. Like there's a bunch of young folks that take notes now, which I find. I think I always put stuff in the perspective of me. I can't imagine that I would have done that at that age, just because I was so all over the place. But so I look at them and I'm like, man, these are the folks. These young folks are the people that really can push us forward with particularly topics like this, right? When we talk about reparations.
And another measure I think too would be, um, reading books and all of that, often isn't seen to be cool or whatever. But I noticed a good number of the young men leaving out with the document that Reginald and
Yeah.
Mike have produced, the reparations
Yeah.
declaration. It's a small book, but just the fact that they would, buy it and or feel like it was important to get it. I think that was another to me sign of the level of seriousness. Again, like I said, when you're 18, 19, 20, you're not interested in like buying books per se, right? So you take, for them to actually purchase the book, to me it seemed like they was that to me that's an indication they really wanted to deepen their understanding of the conversation on reparations.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about um, the various aspects of reparations, right? Of course, there's the monetary piece that most people associate, because there's even I've seen various like stuff on TikTok or in social media. Give me my check, that kind of thing, um, which for me personally kind of irritates me, but whatever. But talk about that, the different aspects of it.
Sure. Well, one of the things I think, um, well, I want to go into the United Nations five forums, but before I even go there, I think one of the things that just comes to my mind is when you think about the word reparations, it comes from repair. And so it's interesting to me that we reduced that conversation down to money.
Mm. Uh oh, looks like Brother
Because
Jumoke.
repair is like now we have what was broken. And to me, the African culture, we had systems in place, where we governed ourselves. We had systems in place where we educated or socialized, ourselves. We had systems in place where we had ways of resolving conflict in the community. And so we lost our languages, we lost our traditions, our values, our cultural ways of being, I don't like to say the word religion, but we didn't even really consider separate our religion from our way of life. That was just our way of life. And so we didn't have this separate thing that we call religion, but we lost our religion for the sake of conversation. And so to me, that it should be the root of the conversation. You know, I use this analogy, and I say, let's say you have a car, and you fill the tank up with gas, right? And somebody steals the car. Now, your car gets recovered by the police, right? And you then say, well, I don't want my car. I just want the money for the tank of gas that I just put in there. I'm like, right? Like, who would say that? Who would do that? But to me, that's the equivalent of us saying we just want money now and not looking at, to me, the car is, like I said, all those things that we just lost, right? Our culture, our civilization, our ways of being, our African center, our languages, our systems of governments, our systems of resolving conflicts, all of those things. And so that's how I look at it. So, but it going, deeper into that, and there is and I'll try to be brief because I kind of like to really go in depth when I talk about this. But the 5 forms of reparations coming from the United Nations, which was looking at how to standardize the conversation on reparations, because people, not just us, but other people have challenged their governments for reparations, right, all around the world. And so they came up with what they call 5 forms of reparations. One being cessation and non-repetition, meaning that those things, those harms that are still happening to those people right now, and that definitely applies to us, have to stop as a part of reparations. That's a part of reparations in and of itself. And not only stop, but can't happen into the future. The next form is restitution. And like I said, restitution talks about restoring people to the place in their language that you would have been if the crime hadn't happened. Again, that would be meaning, again, looking at language and culture and citizenship, looking at nationhood, looking at possibly going back to Africa, all of those things. It talks about that in that definition, returning to the people to where they were. We were kidnapped. We're over here now. We've been over here for several generations, so we've gotten comfortable with the United States. But if you think about it, anybody that's ever been kidnapped, you want to go back home, right? You want to go back to where you were from, where you were kidnapped from. Who wouldn't want that, Most of the time, you don't want to stay in a place where you were kidnapped, right? But again, I understand that's a whole other conversation. Where we are now is a little bit different now because it's been several years or several generations living in a place where we've been kidnapped, and many of us have come to like it. But it is what it is. So anyway, another form of reparations, like I said, we won't focus on that one, is compensation. And another form is rehabilitation. So again, rehabilitation says, look, if there was harm done to these people, then obviously they have some health challenges. They have psychological challenges, emotional challenges, mental challenges, and reparations need to be part of their healing, and their reparation package must be that they get resources to address all of those concerns and those issues, so they can repair themselves from the level of health, including mental health, emotional health, and well-being. All of us have been traumatized as Black people in America. Our parents were traumatized, our grandparents were traumatized, and we have to do some really deep work such that we don't pass the effects of that trauma down to our children and their children. And then the last one is satisfaction. So satisfaction looks at the narrative of the people, right? It looks at restoring their dignity. It looks at apologies. It looks at museums. Even things like, again, this is coming from the United States, even things like recognition of say, massacres and things like that. So, for example, we know, let's say the African burial ground in New York would be like an example, right? So they're digging in New York and to build a building, and they come across an African burial ground. And in that case, luckily, the community organized and galvanized to, stop construction. We had to, get some archaeologists to see who these bones belong to, African people, and they ended up building a monument there, the African burial ground, museum and everything. But you have places like that all around the country where, mass graves or where there was massacres and things, and those things, sometimes the bones are, need to be excavated, or or put in another place with a, and recognized, say, with a monument or some kind of something to tell a story. I guess a good example, I'll close with this one. A good example would be like the Chattahoochee Brick right there in Georgia, right? So we have our brothers and sisters that, were treated as bad as slaves or worse than slavery in some ways, at least just as bad. And again, there's no marker there. There's been a proposed to create a museum there and a marker. But again, that's all part of satisfaction. Like, how do we honor the atrocities that have happened to African people in a dignified way? Like I said, through education, through museums, and things like that.
It's funny that you mentioned Chattahoochee because I was thinking about that earlier because roughly a year ago we had a ceremony at the
Yeah,
Chattahoochee Brick Company,
yeah.
and I was just thinking about it, and then DB Derek Bozeman posted that this weekend they're gonna have a second ceremony
Okay,
um,
great.
at the same location. So yeah,
Yeah,
um,
the Atlanta chapter of Incoba, we attended that ceremony. And actually, the day before, we did our own ceremony as well.
okay,
Yeah, and
yeah,
that was very spiritual,
mm,
very powerful. We had, like I said, we did a ceremony there the day before, the one that the organization, NARC, led, National African American Reparations Commission, led the biggest ceremony that you're referring to.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you're right. It was very spiritual. Like there was a feeling in that space for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, lots to unpack there with those different steps that you just mentioned. One of the things that I wanted to touch on though is reparations is not just necessarily a government thing, right? Um,
Right.
it can come from other areas. Speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So, yeah, and the definition of reparations in COBRA refers to governments, institutions, corporations, and families, right?
Hmm.
So institutions could be like, and for example, in Chicago, and it's true in many other places too, but in Chicago, there was our community and COBRA activists were looking at a particular college, a particular um, medical institution. I want to say Rush Memorial. That may not be the exact name. I think that's the name.
Rush.
But anyway,
Mhm.
uh, there's a
Rush.
hospital, right?
Yeah. Rush. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So there was a time when many of these teaching hospitals would, dig up the bones of our ancestors, the cadavers of our ancestors, to use in the to teach about anatomy, so that they could in their classes, right? And teaching them about medicine, right? And so again, that wasn't done with those families' permission and things like that. So there was a call for them to make some type of amends to the Black community in terms of that. And like I said, and there's other hospitals that we know that was a pattern, all around the country, of youth digging up Black bodies to use um, in their teaching hospitals. So that's an example of, looking at institutions, as well as you've had many, college students have organized around, getting the colleges to universities to acknowledge reparations. And that's happened on different levels. Like, we've had some of the main Ivy League schools look at it, Georgetown and Princeton and Harvard, Yale, those schools. But also there's another, I say, second tier group of colleges called University Studies. They formed a group called University Studying Slavery. And for about 5 or 6 years now, they used to meet twice a month. Again, COVID kind of impacted everything, but they were meeting twice a month, twice a year, to have discussions. And as they, again, sometimes would find African burial grounds on their campus or near the campus, or find out about, Africans that worked to build the campus and didn't get compensated. Or even if you talk about some of the earlier colleges like Harvard and Yale, many of the professors and the students had enslaved Africans, like bought them as their laborers. So, they would wash their clothes and feed them and things like that. And so there's been a conversation on the college campuses around reparations. And that group I was mentioning, the University Studying Slavery, I started going to their meetings. Like, after y'all study after y'all doing all this research on the role of slavery in your college campus, then what? The next logical conversation is reparations. And so the state of Virginia, which is where that conversation really initiated, has already now moved forward with looking at the whole state of Virginia university system addressing reparations. So it's happening. That's, again, institutions, corporations. We've had there's been several lawsuits looking at some of the corporations that have been involved in enslavement as well as convict leasing. And, so there's been, uh, sometimes they've made volunteer to make some payment around, to acknowledge their harms to African people during the enslavement period. Particularly, there was at one point, Wachovia Bank did that. I think Wachovia, I forgot, these banks buy up other banks, so I think Wachovia is now under Wells Fargo. But anyway, we are, part of our strategy is to look at not just government, but also individuals, corporations, institutions. There's some organizations that have set up funds where allowing white people to say, look, I recognize, my family made wealth through enslavement, or I just recognize that I benefit from this, enslavement and oppression of black people. And I feel, and I really want to, I'm sincere about, seeing a difference. And, here I was willing to put some money into this fund, to address reparations and redress for people of African descent. But that's happening as well.
Love it, because when you think about it, in this country particularly, you talk about banks and all these other institutions. You know that their wealth is built on the backs of slave trade, and even from there, even thereafter, the work of black folks that maybe been indentured or whatever. So, what are your thoughts about?
America couldn't have even shifted from, or even the world really. Not just they couldn't, because we don't know how history would unfold. Let's just put it like this: the shift in America and in the world from, say, agricultural society into an industrial society is largely based on the wealth that was created because of slavery. Again, that's not the way we learned it in school, right?
No.
In high school, but that is the case. We learned about, these people started coming up with, machines and stuff to better, to more efficiently turn, say, cotton into fabric and all of that, and started creating factories, and the industrial age starts to come on board with all of this science and invention, which did contribute to it. But another part of the story was that the wealth that was generated allowed these people to tinker around and create these inventions that helped to shift us into the industrial age. That part of the story needs to be told.
There's so much of the story that has been muted for so long, right?
Sure.
And that's been for some very specific reasons. The least of which being that people of African descent have been the biggest commodity that the world has had,
right.
Ever. More than gold, more than you name it, ever. So let me ask you this, because we're getting toward the end here, but I wanted to just pick your brain on this a little bit. One of the things that you talk about in the reparations piece is, building the nation, or building a nation here separate, or going back to Africa. What are your thoughts on how Africa has been affected by the slave trade and all those things around it? Because in my mind, there would be effects there in that land too, that that colonialism has affected actually the motherland as well.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, definitely. The conversation of reparations, and there's some folks that have been addressing it, like in Namibia and some other places. But it really would be good to see our brothers in Africa, brothers and sisters in Africa, really to organize more and call on reparations directly from those European colonial powers that that colonized those those countries, and even just the fact that they are countries now, right? On one level, that's good, and on another level, it poses a lot of challenges because those borders are artificial borders that were carved up by the colonial powers, right?
Mm.
So there's this continental Africa, and their reparations should also, not just be for, for colonialism and the loss of, black bodies that left, that were taken from Africa, but also for all of the resources and things in Africa as well. All of the, gold and aluminum and bauxite and all of those, things that were taken
Diamonds,
out
yeah.
of Africa, still being taken out from Africa, right? All of that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were. I'll leave it there because I don't know. I know some people talk about. I don't know if you were trying to go there. Some people talk about like people of African descent owing African Americans reparations. In terms of them collaborating with the colonial powers, which that is a conversation that comes up. And what I let people know is a couple things. One is that there are groups, ethnic groups in Africa that have recognized their collusion with the colonial powers in selling us off. And they have apologized formally and have had ceremonies. And because that's how we do things in African culture tradition, we political and all of that is their way of doing it. We have ceremonies. And they've had those ceremonies to cleanse themselves and to apologize to us and offer us land. And offer us land. So those who do want to come back home, they say, here, we apologize, here is some land for you to reestablish yourself here in Africa. Now, and a really only challenge with that is that we haven't really taken them up on those offers.
I need to talk to somebody then.
Yeah, but it's happening.
Get my 40 acres somewhere. Hey.
There you go.
Man, brother Jumoke, we are up against the clock, man, and I could sit here and talk with you all night long, brother, because it's just such a meaningful and rich conversation, especially with somebody like you who's been doing this work for so long and has fully educated yourself on all avenues as it relates to reparations, man. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for the work. More importantly, thank you for the work that you've been doing and you continue to do. Because I truly believe that with folks like you and all those that that do the work, and those of us who are on the outside supporting and wanting to do more, that we'll get there. I think that it's going to happen. As we said, it may have to be stair steps, but we're going to get there. And again, as we enrich these younger folks with their levels of information and technology, I think that that's going to be even more impactful as well.
And I know we're coming up against the time, but I realized I didn't answer the other part of your question about the nationhood. I want to say this real quick.
Go ahead.
So, we've heard over the years all these statistics talking about how America, what they call it, the browning of America, right? How the population is shifting in America, and that by 2040, America might look more like 30% people of African descent, right? 30% Hispanic, 30% European American, and 10% other, right? And to me, when we get to that level of configuration, it's definitely more likely that we could begin to carve up the United States, right? And say, certain southern states would be where the black nation could be, from Texas to California could be the Hispanic nation, and the Northeast, Midwest would be the European nation, and even have some states in the middle. I call them, we could have some buffer states with the multicultural states to go and live in, say, maybe Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, whatever, make those the multicultural states. So, but I think that will become more realistic, and the possibility of that. And we have seen it happen in history where, a group of people have carved out within the land that they live on, their own nation. So it's not
Mm.
impossible. It can happen in the United States. United States, we always say we got to think long range as well. I mean, we go back a few hundred years. This wasn't even the United States of America, right? It's only been in existence for a few hundred years, right? So, things can change and evolve over time. I just wanted to say that, and thank you. I know we only called out one ancestor, but so many ancestors that have worked hard to get us to where we are now, and I just feel blessed to have worked with many of them, some of them, and they inspire me. I believe they speak to me and whisper in my ear, and I'm feel proud to do this work. I hope that I'm honoring and continuing the work that they did in the way that they did, and just want to let people know officially you can get in touch with Encobra on our website, encobraonline.org, Encobra, Ncobra online.org, and we actually are reconstructing the website. So bear with us over the next month or two if you go and it's only partially up or partially down or whatever. But we are working to reinvent the website. But at least that's how to get in touch with us, as well as we have social media handles as well on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter as well. And
Awesome.
people can get in touch with me directly. I'm at reparationsj@gmail.com. That's reparations, the letter J at gmail.com. You can contact me directly there. 678-437-7882. 678-437-7882. Brother
Awesome.
Jumoke.
And we're
Thank you,
gonna put
Marty, for what y'all do and holding this space for Black men. Very
man.
powerful work.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And just so everybody knows, we have in the link is in the bio. The bio is in the link for this broadcast. So we'll have all of your information in there as well. Brother,
Okay.
we end this just like we do with live one. So I know you're driving, so you're gonna have to kind of act the part out like we're locking arms. But
Okay.
just like we do in person, I have a link in
All
this
right.
chain,
I'm a link in this chain,
and it won't break here.
and it won't break here.
I'm a link in this chain,
I'm a link in this chain,
and it won't break here.
and it won't break here.
We are links in this chain,
We are linked to this chain,
and we won't break here.
and we won't break here.
Ashe.
I
Brother,
said,
thank you again. I can't thank you enough, Brother Jumoke. Drive safe, and we'll
yes,
be in
thank you.
touch soon, man.
All right.
Okay,
Very
much
good.
love.
Yes.
All right, take care now.
Peace and power. Reparations now.
Right now, reparations now.
Right now.
All right.